Earth's Deathworlders answered the SOS. With no mercy, Commander Zarathic's 6 arms trembled as she watched the tactical display aboard the Galactic Coalition cruiser Harmony's Edge. The crimson dots representing the Vorthak Dominion fleet had completely surrounded the research station Kepler 442b. What had started as a routine scientific mission to study the unusual gravitational anomalies in this system had become a nightmare. "Commander, we're receiving another transmission from the research station," Communications Officer Veltar announced, his chitinous shell clicking nervously. The insectoid being's compound eyes reflected the emergency lighting that bathed the bridge in an ominous red glow. "Put it through," Zarathic commanded, though she already knew what she would hear. The same desperate plea that had been repeating for the past 6 hours. Dr. Mira Chen's voice crackled through the speakers, barely audible over the sound of explosions and screaming in the background. "This is Kepler Research Station to any coalition forces in the sector. We are under attack by Vorthak forces. They've breached the outer hull. We have over 300 civilians, including families and children. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need immediate evacuation. The Vorthak are not taking prisoners." The transmission cut to static, and the bridge fell silent, except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Zarathic's species, the Kalari, were known throughout the galaxy for their tactical brilliance and calm demeanor under pressure. But even she felt her resolve wavering as she stared at the impossible odds displayed before them. The Harmony's Edge was a diplomatic vessel designed for scientific missions and peaceful negotiations. Against the 12 Vorthak destroyers that had appeared seemingly from nowhere, it might as well have been a transport shuttle. The Vorthak were raiders, pirates who had grown bold in recent months, attacking isolated stations and convoys along the Outer Rim territories. "Analysis, Lieutenant Korux," Zarathic said to her tactical officer, a stocky Dralian whose rocky skin had turned a worried shade of gray. "The Vorthak fleet consists of 12 heavy destroyers, Commander. Each one outguns us 5-1. Their positioning suggests they're preparing to board the station rather than destroy it outright." Typical Vorthak behavior. They want the technology and any valuable personnel they can sell. Zarathic's primary arms folded across her chest, while her secondary arms worked the command console. The mathematics were brutal. Even if they called for reinforcements, the nearest coalition fleet was 4 days away. The research station wouldn't last 4 hours. "Commander," Veltar's voice interrupted her thoughts. "We're receiving a priority transmission on the emergency frequencies. It's from Earth." Every being on the bridge turned to stare at the communications officer. Earth was 3 systems away, and the humans had only recently been granted provisional membership in the Galactic Coalition. Most species still considered them primitive Deathworlders who had somehow managed to achieve faster-than-light travel despite their violent nature and hostile home planet. "Earth?" Zarathic repeated, her voice betraying her confusion. "Are you certain?" "Yes, Commander. The signal is definitely originating from Sol system. It's being transmitted by something called the Terran Defense Fleet." "Put it through." A new voice filled the bridge, distinctly human but carrying an authority that made Zarathic's scales ripple with unexpected unease. "This is Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Terran Defense Fleet to any coalition forces in the Kepler system. We monitored your distress signals and are en route to provide assistance. Recommend you maintain safe distance from the research station. We'll handle the Vorthak situation." Zarathic's 4 eyes widened in disbelief. "This is Commander Zarathic of the coalition vessel Harmony's Edge. Admiral Mitchell, with all respect, the Vorthak have 12 heavy destroyers. What assets are you deploying?" There was a pause before the human admiral responded, and when she did, there was something in her voice that made the bridge crew exchange worried glances. "Commander, we're deploying 3 ships. ETA is 47 minutes. We strongly advise you to move to a minimum safe distance of 50,000 kilometers. 3 ships? Lieutenant Korak sputtered. Against 12 Vorthak destroyers? Commander, the humans must not understand the tactical situation. Zarathic was about to respond when her sensor operator, a young Kalari named Thys, suddenly straightened in her chair. Commander, I'm detecting massive gravitational distortions at the edge of the system. 3 contacts, extremely large, moving at... That can't be right. Report this. Ma'am, they're traveling at 0.87 light speed. I've never seen anything move that fast in normal space. The energy readings are off the scale. The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this information. 0.87 light speed in normal space was theoretically possible, but required technology far beyond what most species possessed. The energy requirements alone would drain the power cores of most ships in seconds. Commander, Veltar's voice was barely a whisper. The Vorthak have detected the approaching vessels. They're repositioning their entire fleet. On the tactical display, the red dots representing the Vorthak ships began moving away from the research station, forming a defensive line between themselves and the approaching human vessels. Zarathic had fought alongside and against many species in her decades of service, but she had never seen the Vorthak retreat from anything. They were brutal and merciless, but they were also fearless to the point of stupidity. What could make the Vorthak afraid? She wondered aloud. The answer came 30 minutes later when the 3 human ships finally decelerated enough for the sensors to get a clear reading. Lieutenant Korax's rock-like features went completely white as the data scrolled across his screen. Commander, you need to see this. These aren't ships. I don't know what they are. Zarathic moved to the tactical station and felt her blood turn cold. The 3 human vessels were unlike anything in the Coalition database. Each one was over 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapon systems that the computer couldn't even identify. The energy readings suggested power cores that dwarfed anything the Coalition had ever built. What are those markings on their hulls? Thys asked, her voice trembling. Zarathic enhanced the visual display and saw painted on each ship's hull in stark white letters, Terra's Wrath, Deathworld's Fury, and No Quarter. Commander, Admiral Mitchell's voice returned to the communications channel. We're about to engage the Vorthak fleet. For your safety and the safety of your crew, I'm ordering you to move to a distance of 100,000 kilometers. Admiral, wait, Zarathic protested. We can assist. The research station has civilians who need evacuation. Negative, Commander. We'll handle the evacuation after we deal with the Vorthak problem. Move to safe distance immediately. That's not a request. The authority in the human's voice left no room for argument. Reluctantly, Zarathic ordered her ship to withdraw to the prescribed distance. As they moved away, she kept her sensors locked on the developing situation near the research station. The Vorthak had formed their traditional battle formation, a wedge designed to concentrate firepower on a single target while maintaining mobility. It was a formation that had served them well against countless victims across the galaxy. But as Zarathic watched, she realized the humans weren't approaching like any military force she had ever encountered. They're not slowing down, Korax reported, his voice filled with disbelief. The human ships are maintaining attack speed directly toward the Vorthak formation. That's suicide, Thys whispered. They'll never be able to maneuver at that velocity. Zarathic was beginning to understand that the humans had no intention of maneuvering. The first human ship, Terra's Wrath, struck the Vorthak formation like a hammer blow. But instead of the expected collision and destruction, something impossible happened. The massive human vessel tore through the Vorthak line, its shield somehow absorbing the concentrated firepower of 6 destroyers, while its own weapons returned fire with a ferocity that turned space itself into a cauldron of destruction. The Vorthak destroyer that took the brunt of Terra's Wrath's assault simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, the next it was expanding debris and superheated plasma. But the human ship didn't stop. It carved through the enemy formation like it was made of paper, its weapon systems tracking and destroying targets faster than the coalition sensors could follow. "How are they moving like that?" Orcs demanded. "At those speeds, they should be flying blind. The G-forces alone should have killed their crew." Before anyone could answer, the second human ship, Deathworld's Fury, demonstrated why the Vorthak were right to be afraid. Instead of engaging the enemy destroyers directly, it launched what appeared to be a spread of torpedoes. But these weren't like any torpedoes in the coalition arsenal. They moved with impossible agility, weaving through Vorthak defensive fire like living things, each one seeking out its target with relentless precision. The explosions that followed defied every law of physics that Zarathik understood. Instead of simple kinetic or energy blasts, these weapons seemed to tear holes in space itself, creating localized gravitational anomalies that crushed the Vorthak ships from within. "Commander," Veltar's voice was filled with awe and terror, "I'm reading massive temporal distortions around those explosions. Whatever those weapons are, they're affecting the fabric of space-time itself." The third human ship, No Quarter, took a different approach entirely. As the surviving Vorthak vessels attempted to flee the system, it simply appeared in their path. Not moved to intercept them, not jumped through hyperspace. It was simply there, as if it had folded space itself to arrive at exactly the right moment. What followed was not a battle, but an execution. The human ships moved with a coordination that suggested they were extensions of a single mind, cutting off escape routes, herding the remaining Vorthak vessels into a killing field where their superior firepower could be brought to bear without risk to the research station. In less than 15 minutes, 12 Vorthak destroyers had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris and radiation. Not a single human ship showed any sign of damage. "Commander," Thys reported, her voice barely audible over the bridge's emergency systems that were still trying to process the sensor data from the engagement. "The human ships are requesting permission to dock with the research station to begin evacuation procedures." Zarathik stared at the tactical display, where 3 impossible human vessels hung in space like sleeping predators. For the first time in her career, she truly understood what the rest of the galaxy meant when they called humanity Deathworlders. "Grant permission," she said quietly, "and send a message to Coalition Command. Tell them we need to completely reevaluate our threat assessment of human military capabilities." As the Harmony's Edge began moving back toward the research station, Zarathik couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy had just witnessed something that would change everything. The humans hadn't just answered a distress call, they had demonstrated a level of military technology and tactical ruthlessness that made every other species' capabilities look primitive by comparison. The Vorthak had learned too late that there was a difference between raiders who preyed on the weak and warriors who had evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. Admiral Mitchell's voice returned to the communications channel, calm and professional, as if she had just completed a routine training exercise rather than annihilated an entire pirate fleet. "Commander Zarathik, this is Admiral Mitchell. We're beginning evacuation of the research station personnel. All civilians will be transferred to our vessels for immediate medical attention and transportation to safety." "Understood, Admiral," Zarathik replied. "We stand ready to assist in any way possible." "That won't be necessary, Commander. We have everything under control. However, I would recommend that you file a complete report of this engagement with your superiors. It's important that the Coalition understands our capabilities and our commitment to protecting innocent lives." As Zarathik watched the human ships begin their rescue operations with the same efficiency they had demonstrated in combat, she realized that the galaxy's understanding of humanity was about to undergo a fundamental shift. These weren't primitive Deathworlders who had stumbled upon space travel. They were predators who had turned their violent nature into the ultimate tool for protecting the innocent and punishing those who would harm them. The Vorthak had called for war when they attacked the research station. The humans had answered with something far worse. They had answered with themselves. Earth's Deathworlders. Second document. Dr. Mira Chen pressed her face against the observation window of the human rescue ship, Terra's Wrath, and watched in stunned silence as her home for the past 3 years slowly receded into the distance. The Kepler research station, which had been on the verge of destruction just hours ago, now looked almost peaceful floating in the void, its emergency lights no longer flashing, its hull breaches sealed by the impossibly efficient human repair teams. Around her, the other survivors from the station huddled in the ship's spacious medical bay, receiving treatment from human medics whose gentle efficiency was almost as remarkable as the devastating display of military might they had witnessed. The contrast was jarring. These same beings who had just erased 12 Vorthak destroyers from existence were now carefully tending to a Kalari child's scraped knee with infinite patience. "Dr. Chen?" A human voice spoke behind her, and she turned to see a tall woman in a crisp blue uniform approaching. The woman's name tag read, Commander Sarah Parks, Medical Division. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to debrief you on what happened before the attack. Admiral Mitchell specifically requested your testimony." Mira nodded, still feeling somewhat dazed by the rapid turn of events. As the station's senior xenobiologist, she had been among the first to detect the anomalous readings that had brought them to this system in the first place. Now she wondered if those readings had somehow attracted the Vorthak attention. Commander Parks led her through corridors that seemed to stretch impossibly far into the ship's interior. The design was unlike anything Mira had seen in Coalition vessels. Everything was built on a scale that suggested beings who thought in terms of vast distances and overwhelming force. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with barely contained energy, and she could feel the thrumming of the massive power cores even through the deck plating. "Commander Parks," Mira said as they walked, "I need to ask, how did you get here so fast? When we sent out the distress signal, the nearest human territory was 3 systems away." Parks glanced at her with what might have been amusement. "Dr. Chen, we've been monitoring this sector for weeks. When the Vorthak started raiding Coalition outposts along the rim, Earth Command authorized the deployment of rapid response fleets to strategic positions throughout the region. But the speed at which you traveled is classified," Parks said firmly, but not unkindly. "What I can tell you is that Earth takes its responsibilities to its allies very seriously. The Coalition granted us provisional membership, and we intend to prove that trust was well placed." They entered what appeared to be a conference room, though like everything else on the ship, it was built to an intimidating scale. Admiral Mitchell sat at the far end of a table that could have seated 30 people, studying a holographic display of the recent battle. She looked up as they entered, and Mira was struck by the woman's eyes. They held a cold intelligence that reminded her uncomfortably of the apex predators she had studied on various death worlds. "Dr. Chen, please sit," Mitchell said, gesturing to a chair across from her. "I need you to tell me everything that happened before the Vorthak arrived, every detail, no matter how small it might seem." Mira settled into the offered chair and tried to organize her thoughts. "We detected the gravitational anomaly 6 weeks ago during a routine stellar cartography mission. The readings were unlike anything we'd seen before, localized distortions in space-time that seemed to follow a pattern. Almost like they were artificially generated." Mitchell's expression didn't change, but Mira noticed her hands still completely on the table's surface. "What kind of pattern?" "Mathematical. Dr. Korath, our Dralian physicist, compared them to various naturally occurring phenomena, but nothing matched. The distortions appeared in prime number sequences across 17 different spatial coordinates. It was clearly an artificial construct, possibly a navigation marker or communication array." "Did you report these findings to Coalition Command?" "Of course. We sent our preliminary data 6 weeks ago and received authorization to investigate, but..." Mira hesitated. But what, Dr. Chen? 3 days ago, we detected something else. Energy signatures that suggested an active power source within the anomalous region. Dr. Korath wanted to launch a probe, but I argued for caution. The readings were similar to some of the artifacts we've discovered on ancient Deathworlds, technology that's far beyond our current understanding. Admiral Mitchell leaned forward slightly. You've encountered similar technology before? Fragments, ruins mostly. The prevailing theory among xenoarchaeologists is that there was an ancient civilization that seeded various death worlds with defensive technologies. Most of it was destroyed during the planetary evolution that made those worlds so hostile, but occasionally we find intact pieces. And you believed this anomaly might be related to these ancient artifacts? It was possible. The mathematical patterns, the energy signatures, they matched theoretical models of what an intact ancient installation might look like. But then the Vorthak arrived and... Mira shrugged helplessly. Mitchell sat back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. Dr. Chen, I'm going to share some information with you that is normally classified at the highest levels of the coalition government. But given what's happened here and what's likely to happen next, you need to understand the full scope of the situation. The holographic display in the center of the table shifted, showing a star map of the local sector. Red markers appeared at various points, indicating the recent Vorthak attacks. But as Mira watched, additional markers appeared in green, showing human fleet positions that she hadn't known existed. For the past 6 months, Mitchell continued, the Terran Defense Fleet has been tracking Vorthak raiding patterns. They're not random pirates, Dr. Chen. They're systematically targeting coalition research facilities and outposts that have reported unusual technological discoveries. You think they're looking for ancient artifacts? We know they are. 3 weeks ago, our intelligence services intercepted Vorthak communications indicating they've been selling recovered artifacts to an unknown buyer. Someone with very deep pockets and very specific interests in ancient death world technology. Mira felt a chill run down her spine. You think the Kepler anomalies were what drew them here? I think your research station stumbled upon something that someone is willing to kill for. And I think the Vorthak attack was intended to eliminate witnesses as much as steal whatever you found. The implications of this crashed over Mira like a wave. Admiral, if someone is actively seeking out ancient Death World artifacts, they could be building up quite an arsenal. Some of the theoretical capabilities we've hypothesized could threaten the stability of the entire galaxy, Mitchell finished, which is why Earth has taken a very personal interest in this situation. Personal? Admiral Mitchell's expression hardened in a way that made Mira unconsciously lean back in her chair. Dr. Chen, humanity has spent the last 50,000 years learning to survive on a planet that actively tries to kill everything that lives on it. We've fought ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and countless extinction events. We've learned that when survival is at stake, half measures are worse than useless. I don't understand. The being or beings behind these attacks have made a fundamental error in judgment. They've assumed that because we're new to the galactic community, we'll follow the same civilized rules of engagement that have allowed the Vorthak to operate with relative impunity for decades. They're wrong. Mitchell stood and walked to the observation window that dominated one wall of the conference room. In the distance, Mira could see the other 2 human ships maintaining their positions near the research station. Even at this distance, there was something predatory about their silhouettes against the stars. Humanity doesn't negotiate with entities that threaten innocent lives, Mitchell continued. We don't engage in prolonged diplomatic solutions when faced with genocidal aggression. We identify the threat, we locate its source, and we eliminate it completely. Admiral, surely the Coalition has protocols for dealing with... The Coalition has protocols for dealing with civilized adversaries, Mitchell interrupted. These protocols assume that all parties involved have some basic respect for civilian life, and some interest in avoiding mutual annihilation. But what happens when you're facing an enemy that has no such limitations? Mira was beginning to understand where this conversation was leading. You eliminate that enemy before they can eliminate you. Exactly. Dr. Chen, within the next 48 hours, this sector is going to become very dangerous. We've identified 17 Vorthak fleet concentrations within 100 light-years of here, and we have strong intelligence suggesting they're all working in coordination with whoever is behind the artifact thefts. You're going to attack all of them. We're going to send a message that will be understood throughout the galaxy. Anyone who threatens Coalition civilians or attempts to weaponize ancient Deathworld technology will face the full response capability of the Terran Defense Fleet. As if summoned by her words, Commander Parks reappeared in the doorway. Admiral, we're receiving priority transmissions from all 3 theater command fleets. Operation Hammerfall is authorized to proceed. Thank you, Commander. Mitchell turned back to Mira. Dr. Chen, I'm ordering your evacuation to the Coalition capital world of Centris. You'll be debriefed by intelligence services there and provided with full protection until this situation is resolved. What about my research? The Kepler anomalies? Will be secured by human forces and studied under the joint auspices of Earth Command and Coalition Science Division. If these anomalies are indeed related to ancient Deathworld technology, then humanity has both the right and the responsibility to ensure they're not misused. As they left the conference room, Mira found herself escorted through sections of the ship she hadn't seen before. Through open doorways, she caught glimpses of activities that reinforced her growing understanding of just how thoroughly the humans had prepared for this conflict. Tactical rooms where holographic displays showed detailed attack plans for targets scattered across dozens of star systems. Weapons lockers that contained devices whose purpose she couldn't even guess. Medical facilities that were clearly designed to handle massive casualties. This wasn't a rescue ship that had happened upon a distress signal. This was a warship that had been positioned and equipped for exactly this type of operation. Commander Parks, she said, as they reached the shuttle bay where a sleek Coalition diplomatic vessel waited to transport her to Centris. The Vorthak fleet we encountered, how did your ships destroy them so easily? Parks paused at the shuttle's entry ramp and considered the question carefully. Dr. Chen, every species that achieves spaceflight develops their military technology based on their experiences with warfare on their homeworld. Most species evolved on planets where resources were abundant and conflicts were relatively civilized affairs with rules and limitations. And humanity? Humanity evolved on a planet where everything from the weather to the wildlife to the geology was actively trying to kill us. We learned warfare from watching how our planet itself wages war. Total, merciless, and absolutely committed to the complete destruction of the opposing force. That's terrifying. Yes, Parks agreed with a slight smile. It is. And for the next few days, that terror is going to be visited upon everyone who thought they could profit from attacking innocent civilians. As Mira's shuttle prepared to depart, she looked back through the viewport at the 3 human ships maintaining their vigil over the research station. She thought about the mathematical patterns in the gravitational anomalies, about ancient civilizations that had somehow survived on hostile Deathworlds, and about what it might mean that their modern descendants had just announced their presence to the galaxy with such overwhelming force. The humans had answered the SOS call with no mercy for their enemies. But as her shuttle jumped to hyperspace, carrying her toward the safety of the Coalition capital, Mira couldn't help wondering if the galaxy was ready for the kind of mercy that humanity showed its friends. Behind them, Admiral Mitchell's fleet began receiving the tactical intelligence they would need for the largest coordinated military operation in human history. The Vorthak and their mysterious employers were about to learn why Deathworld species didn't negotiate with terrorists. They eliminated them. Earth's Deathworlders, third document, High Coordinator Velnara of the Galactic Coalition stood before the massive viewport in her office on Centris, watching the steady stream of human warships entering the capital system. For 3 days, they had been arriving in groups of 12, massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed even the largest coalition vessels, their hulls bearing names that spoke of humanity's violent nature. Thermopylae's Last Stand, Stalingrad's Fury, Normandy's Thunder. Each ship that arrived brought with it recordings of what humanity was calling Operation Hammerfall, the systematic destruction of Vorthak raiding fleets across 17 star systems. The footage was unlike anything the Coalition had ever witnessed. Not battles, but executions. Entire pirate armadas reduced to expanding debris fields in minutes. High Coordinator, her aide, a nervous Kalari named Thisara, approached with a data pad. The final casualty reports from the human operations. Velnara accepted the pad and scrolled through the numbers, her 6 tentacles twitching with disbelief. These can't be correct. Are you telling me the humans destroyed over 400 Vorthak ships without losing a single vessel? The reports have been verified by Coalition observers in 7 different systems, High Coordinator. The human fleet suffered 0 casualties. Some ships reported minor shield damage, but nothing that required them to withdraw from combat. Velnara set the pad aside and returned her attention to the viewport. The implications were staggering. The Vorthak had been a persistent threat to Coalition shipping for over 50 years. Multiple species had attempted to deal with them through diplomacy, economic pressure, and limited military action. All had failed because the Vorthak operated from hidden bases in uncharted space and could simply disappear when faced with serious resistance. Humanity had solved the problem in 72 hours by hunting down every single Vorthak fleet in the sector and destroying them without mercy or negotiation. High Coordinator, Thisara continued, there's more. The humans have requested an emergency session of the Coalition Council. Admiral Mitchell and someone called Director Chen are requesting permission to brief the Council on what they discovered during their operations. Before Velnara could respond, her private communication system chimed with an urgent message from Coalition intelligence. She activated the holographic display and found herself facing Director Korthax, the Dralian who headed the Coalition's most secret operations. High Coordinator, we have a problem, Korthax said without preamble. A big one. The humans have been sharing their intelligence data from the Vorthak raids, and we've uncovered something that threatens the stability of the entire galaxy. Explain. The Vorthak weren't just pirates. They were being coordinated by an entity we're calling the Curator, someone who's been systematically collecting ancient Deathworld artifacts for at least 2 centuries. And based on the technology the humans recovered from Vorthak ships, the Curator has been building something. The holographic display shifted to show technical schematics that made Velnara's blood run cold. What am I looking at? Our best analysis suggests it's a weapon system based on ancient Deathworld technology. If our theoretical models are correct, it could generate artificial gravitational anomalies powerful enough to collapse entire star systems. Velnara stared at the display in horror. Who is behind this? What species would even attempt such a thing? That's the problem, High Coordinator. We don't know. The Curator has been operating through intermediaries and shell corporations for centuries. Every lead we follow disappears into layers of false identities and misdirection. But the humans... Korthax paused significantly. The humans say they have a way to find them. How? I think you should hear this directly from Admiral Mitchell. She and her team are waiting outside your office. Velnara looked toward her office doors in surprise. She hadn't authorized any meetings, and her security detail would never allow unscheduled visitors to reach her private offices. They're here? How did they get past? High Coordinator. Her security chief's voice came through the intercom. Admiral Mitchell and her team are requesting immediate audience. They say it's a matter of galactic security. Through the viewport, Velnara could see more human ships arriving in the system. Not the massive dreadnoughts this time, but sleeker vessels that moved with an almost predatory grace. Ships whose design spoke of purposes she didn't want to contemplate. "Send them in," she said finally. The doors to her office slid open, and Admiral Mitchell entered, followed by a human woman in civilian clothes and what appeared to be a heavily modified synthetic being. But it was the fourth member of their group that made Velnara's tentacles curl in instinctive fear. A human male whose presence seemed to radiate barely contained violence. "High Coordinator," Admiral Mitchell said, offering a crisp military salute. "Thank you for seeing us on short notice. I'd like to introduce Dr. Sarah Chen, our xenoarchaeology specialist, Tactical AI Unit Prometheus, and Colonel Marcus Stone of Terran Special Operations." Velnara gestured for them to take seats around her conference table, though she noticed that Colonel Stone remained standing near the wall, his eyes constantly scanning for threats that didn't exist in one of the most secure buildings in Coalition space. "Admiral, Director Korthax briefed me on your discoveries during the Vorthak operations. What exactly did you find?" Dr. Chen activated a portable holographic display that filled the center of the table with three-dimensional images of recovered artifacts. "High Coordinator, during our raids on Vorthak facilities, we recovered over 200 ancient artifacts from 17 different Deathworld sites. The technology level is far beyond anything currently known to galactic science." "We know about the ancient civilizations," Velnara said. "Archaeological teams have been studying their ruins for decades." "With respect, High Coordinator, you've been studying their garbage," Dr. Chen replied. "What we recovered from the Vorthak represents intact, functional technology. Weapon systems, power cores, computing matrices, all of it designed by beings who faced extinction-level threats on a regular basis." The holographic display shifted to show a new image, a crystalline structure the size of a small moon, surrounded by geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. "This is what the Curator has been building. We found the construction plans in a Vorthak database that our AI specialists were able to crack." "What does it do?" Velnara asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. "It's a reality manipulation device," the synthetic being called Prometheus said, its voice carrying harmonics that suggested computational power beyond anything the Coalition possessed. "Based on our analysis of the recovered schematics, it can alter the fundamental constants of physics within a localized space. Gravity, strong and weak nuclear forces, electromagnetic radiation, all of it becomes malleable to the operator's will." Velnara felt her world spinning. That's impossible. The energy requirements alone are being met by linking together dozens of ancient Deathworld artifacts, Dr. Chen interrupted. "Each one designed to channel the violent energies that made those worlds so hostile. Combined together in this configuration, they create a power source equivalent to a small star." Colonel Stone finally spoke, his voice carrying the flat tone of someone who had seen too much violence. "High Coordinator, we need to understand something here. Whoever the Curator is, they're not planning to use this weapon against specific targets. They're planning to remake the galaxy according to their vision." Admiral Mitchell leaned forward. "Our intelligence analysis suggests the Curator views most current galactic species as evolutionary dead ends. They believe that only beings who have survived Deathworld conditions deserve to exist in their new reality." "That's genocide on a galactic scale," Velnara whispered. "Yes, it is," Mitchell confirmed. "Which brings us to why we're here. Humanity has a proposal for the Coalition Council." "What kind of proposal?" "We know where the Curator is building their weapon," Colonel Stone said, moving to stand behind his teammates. "And we know how to destroy it. But it's going to require resources and authorization that only the Coalition can provide." Prometheus activated another holographic display, this one showing a star system that Velnara didn't recognize. The Curator's facility is located in a system designated DW447 in Coalition charts. It's a trinary star system with 17 planetary bodies, 11 of which are classified as uninhabitable death worlds. The perfect place to hide, Dr. Chen added. No rational species would willingly travel to such a hostile system, and the gravitational anomalies from the 3 stars make long-range scanning impossible. How do you know all this? Velnara demanded. Because 3 days ago, a Terran deep reconnaissance team infiltrated the system and gathered intelligence on the Curator's operations, Admiral Mitchell said matter-of-factly. Velnara stared at her in disbelief. You sent people into a hostile star system without Coalition authorization? High Coordinator, when we're facing the potential extinction of all life in the galaxy, we don't wait for committee approval, Colonel Stone said bluntly. Our reconnaissance team confirmed that the Curator's weapon is nearly complete. We estimate less than 2 weeks before it becomes operational. What are you proposing? A joint Coalition Terran operation to destroy the facility and eliminate the Curator threat permanently, Mitchell said. But it has to be done right. This isn't like the Vorthak raids, where we could simply overwhelm the enemy with superior firepower. We're dealing with technology that could literally rewrite the laws of physics. What would such an operation require? Everything, Prometheus said. Every ship, every weapon, every resource that humanity and the Coalition can bring to bear. And even then, success is not guaranteed. Dr. Chen manipulated the holographic display to show detailed tactical plans. The facility is protected by automated defense systems based on ancient Deathworld technology. Getting close enough to plant the charges we'll need will require simultaneous assaults on 17 different planetary installations. Charges? Antimatter devices designed to destabilize the weapon's power core, Admiral Mitchell explained. If we can overload the connected artifacts simultaneously, the resulting explosion should be sufficient to destroy the entire system. Colonel Stone's expression was grim. High Coordinator, I need to be completely honest with you about what this operation will cost. We're talking about a full-scale military assault on positions defended by technology we don't fully understand. Casualty estimates are in the hundreds of thousands. But if we don't act, Dr. Chen added quietly, casualty estimates are in the trillions. Velnara sat in silence for several minutes, processing what she had been told. Outside the viewport, the human fleet continued to grow, each new arrival adding to a force that already dwarfed anything the Coalition had ever assembled. Admiral Mitchell, she said finally, if I authorize this operation, what guarantee do I have that humanity won't use this crisis to seize control of Coalition space? You don't, Mitchell replied honestly. What you have instead is our word that humanity values the diversity and freedom that the Coalition represents, and our commitment that when this crisis is over, we'll return to our role as partners, not conquerors. The Curator made one critical error in their planning, Colonel Stone added. They assumed that Deathworld species were inherently violent and would eventually turn on each other. They were counting on humanity to be so traumatized by conflict that we'd withdraw from galactic affairs entirely. Instead, Dr. Chen said with a slight smile, they've discovered that beings who survive Deathworlds don't just learn how to kill. We learn how to protect. And right now, protecting the galaxy means destroying anyone who threatens it. Velnara looked at each of the humans in turn, seeing in their faces the same cold determination that had allowed them to annihilate the Vorthak fleets without hesitation. But she also saw something else, a genuine commitment to preserving life, even at the cost of their own. I'll call an emergency session of the Coalition Council, she said. But Admiral, I want you to understand something. If this operation fails, if the Curator's weapon becomes operational, the blood of trillions will be on all of our hands. High Coordinator, Admiral Mitchell said as her team prepared to leave. The blood of trillions is already on the Curator's hands. We're just making sure it doesn't stay there." As the humans left her office, Velnara returned to the viewport and watched their fleet preparing for what would either be the greatest victory in galactic history or the last battle any of them would ever fight. The Deathworlders had answered the SOS with no mercy for their enemies. Now they were about to discover if mercy was enough to save a galaxy from its own nightmares.